The SDR position is absolutely critical to getting your foot in the door to tech sales. If you have limited to no experience in tech, in sales, etc., you're almost always going to have to start as an SDR in tech sales. So I think a lot of people confuse the fact that success in SDR means they'll be immediately successful as an account executive. Now, I do largely agree with that. If you're an SDR that's having a lot of success or you're very ambitious, there's no doubt you can find success relatively easily as an account executive, assuming you put in the work and you're willing to adapt and listen to the requirements of that job. But I have seen people who are very good at the SDR position, make tons of dials, do all of these different things that are required of an SDR. But when it comes time to actually closing business, getting buy-in from end users that are CEOs, CTOs, etc., and actually closing the deal, it can become much more challenging. And it requires a little bit of rewiring in terms of how you're prioritizing your day-to-day and the way that you're structuring the information that you're giving to a client. So like as an example, as an SDR, you may be expected to make anywhere on the lower side 30 to 40 dials a day to up to 100 plus, right? That's great. And that amount of speed is required. And in many cases, it's better to just keep moving and not think, not strategically plan so much as just dial. There's so many cases where as an SDR, you can overdo your research. You've planned out to make 60 calls in a day, 100 calls in a day, and the time you spend researching is ultimately unfruitful, and you realize you spent 40 minutes, an hour, 2 hours researching an account, and in reality, one person even picked up in the first place. Now, that kind of mentality and speed of prospecting is great to maintain elements of in an account executive role, but as you're actually closing business, as you're getting introduced up the chain to more important stakeholders that ultimately sign off on the deal, moving at a slightly slower pace and doing more research, as an example, is required. And not only that, but being able to speak to all different types of personas to get buy-in, whether it's on the business side, whether it's on the technical side, are paramount. As an SDR selling a highly technical product, it's less common that you're calling or interacting with the business stakeholder right out of the gate. So you're not calling the CEO to ask them if they're interested to learn more about a database that you're selling or a cloud tool or whatever it might be, right? You're calling the individual developers, the technical managers, and maybe up to the CTO, trying to get them to better understand what your product is about and see if they'd be willing to take more of a conversation. From there, as an account executive, the mindset has to change. Yes, it's great that you know the value of the product. It's great that you can understand maybe what they're doing today and understand where they're trying to go. Maybe if you're getting really good at your job in the SDR role, you're doing a lot of research about the company, you're able to lead some more in-depth discovery questions and queue it up for the account executive team. And it's great that maybe you can articulate the value of your product. But as you take it at the account executive level, you need to better align with the strategic goals of the company and tie value of the product to that. And it's not a cookie cutter uniform thing where it's like, hey, our product is better than competitor B. If you're getting to the point where you're in final negotiations, in many cases, a tech company, there may be situations where they're comparing you directly to a competitor, but in many cases as well, some companies may be making a decision to either move forward with your product or stay where they're at currently, which requires a totally different skill set. If you're not able to better understand the account in its entirety, not only from a technical standpoint, but a business standpoint, like, it's great to know that maybe they're having problems with their current tool, but have you actually, as an account executive, quantified what that pain means? Is that costing them money? Do they have downtime where users are churning or unsubscribing from their website, from whatever it might be? Now, are they spending weeks at a time to fix this? Are the individual developers spending weekends? Have they had to hire other people to maintain this technology that is now becoming a huge burden for them? Because even if they think that, and even if they call and take the initial call and start to talk to you like, yeah, we're not totally happy about our product right now, so what you're doing might be a fit. If you're just like, great, and all you do is talk about the value, you haven't understood how painful it is. What is the problem that they're truly facing? And then not only that, are you taking that to the business stakeholder and saying, hey, so-and-so, I know you're not necessarily deep on the day-to-day tech, but what I'm hearing from your development team is that they've spent weekends doing this. They also felt like some of the job openings you have right now for software engineers, many of those responsibilities could be fixed if the current tool that you're using was more robust, right? These are the types of things we have to slow down and really extract the information. Whereas SDR, to no fault of your own, your goal is to get those meetings set up and get them in front of your team. And you're trying to do that pretty quickly, and more power to you. There's a necessity and an element that you just have to go fast and you can't overthink it. As we get to that account executive level, you really have to be thorough, not only in your own discovery, but research, again, of the business, of the individual people you're talking to. Can you go to their LinkedIn profile, see the types of technology they're working with, See if they're connected to more senior members of your team. See if there are other mutual connections or things you can find out on the internet. Like a very practical example, the tools that I sell, there are companies, because they're open source products, that actually contribute to open source projects. So in some cases, when I've been meeting with clients, I've been talking to them, I've actually found that they've contributed some software to this open source project in the past. And the fact that I understood that, one, gave me a better idea of what they're doing with the software beforehand, but two, impresses them when I show up to the table and I can reference that exact project that they've contributed to in the past and discuss how what we're doing builds on top of what they were already doing strategically as a company. Now, again, you can slice and dice this a million different ways, and there's a lot of things, but I think the key distinction when you're going from SDR to account executive, how well do you know your product? Do you know it in and out? Do you know it almost as good as the sales engineers on your team? Do you know it as well as any account executive on your team, and can you present that to relevant leadership? That's step one. But step two, can you slow down from the day-to-day pace of an SDR, which is great, don't get me wrong, you don't want to throw it out completely, but can you show that you're willing to do research on an account? Can you show that you're able to extract really meaningful pain points on their side and present that in a digestible way to them to make the value or return on investment or features of your product really shine above the status quo, whether that's against a competitive product that you're selling against, or trying to get them to move to your platform versus doing nothing, which is a very different and challenging sale as well. Lastly, one of the things that was difficult for me making that move from SDR to account executive is I'm very particular about the emails that I send, the calls that I did as an SDR. I really liked and had a strong methodology of how I wanted to engage with customers and try and get them to agree to a meeting. To some extent, you have to let go of that control. I found myself when I first moved to an account executive role, constantly looking over my SDR's emails, constantly looking over the ways that they were generating pipeline. And you have to be able to detach yourself from that, give them the freedom to learn, and then make them successful through your guidance, through the tools that you can provide, etc. You've got to detach yourself from the necessity of generating pipeline at the same pace as an SDR. No question, if you stop prospecting, if you stop calling, if you stop emailing, you're not going to be successful as an account executive, but it's also worth blocking time to intentionally slow down, do more research on accounts, make sure you know the product so well that you're able to extract really meaningful problems from the prospects you're speaking with, and be able to map the solutions that your product provides for different stakeholders, both technical and business oriented along the way. To that point, we've talked about this in other videos, but as you get to that account executive role, you really have to pride yourself on not necessarily being as technical as writing code, but truly being a product expert. And we actually made a video on imposter syndrome in tech sales. So if you want to check that out after this video, I'd recommend that to get a better idea of what that's like, how you can address and overcome it. But I appreciate everyone's time, and we'll see you next week.